Are you happy in your business? Now, I have had my share of emotional ups and downs in my 20 years of being a solo entrepreneur coach. And the patterns I've seen in myself and in my clients is that those downs are usually when I was personally feeling unfulfilled. Sometimes it was because a launch that flopped, and sometimes it was just life and had nothing to do with business. But those ups, oh boy, those are the times when I was feeling my most authentic and completely aligned to my purpose, or when I just felt like I was rocking that work-life balance. I would be thinking I could do this all day long and never feel tired. One of my loves is sharing what works for me and what has been working for my clients to achieve this very feeling, full of passion, happiness, peace, and freedom. So I decided to create a private podcast for coaches. Maybe you just want to develop better communication skills that boosts engagement, leads to better results, and makes you feel like you're actually making a difference in the lives of the people you serve. Then you're invited too. We talk about this and more in the UBU private podcast for coaches. Whether you're a mentor, a parent, or run a client-focused business, coaching skills benefit everyone and anyone who wants to communicate in a way that builds relationships. Fall in love with your life and business again. Click the link in the show notes for your invitation to join us right now. Then come back and enjoy this episode. Do you want me to not record?
You
Or are
can.
you okay? I can record? Okay.
Yeah, I can get through it without frying now.
It's okay if you cry too. It's time to stop comparing yourself to others and plug into what is uniquely you. Welcome to Unbox Your Personality, the podcast for coaches, creatives, and educators like you who understand that your happiness makes you more effective at what you do, bringing out the best in others. I'm Jen P. Higgins, personality strategist and Enneagram fluff remover. Get laser focused on who you are and who you aren't, so you're free to make the impact you were born to make. And have fun doing it. Your personality is your business. So let's get down to business. So the question is that why divorce is common around certain years of marriage?
So, in marriage, there's always that 7-year itch, right? It's like couples kind of go through these different processes of growing up and communication, and they get a little antsy at around that 7-year mark in particular. And then I think that 20-year mark is also another one. Now, I've had clients who've been married for, 19 years. And then right before that 20-year mark, because in certain states, you don't have to pay as much if you're married under 20 years, right? So they start thinking about things like that too. It's kind of a cop-out, but that's reality. I think if you just kind of check in and pay attention to what's shifting, and the biggest thing, this is my biggest takeaway always. How often are you swallowing while you're around your loved one?
Swallowing.
Yes, swallowing. So if you're holding back and you're swallowing a lot, what is it that you need to say that you're not saying? And I won't just put that in as a spouse situation. Think about it too with your boss or a coworker. Whenever we start writing that fine line of feeling like we're not being heard, we end up swallowing our words to just save face. Just to get by, just to get through.
So this is what I'm thinking right now, you saying that. So I had a client many years ago that she said that she swallows all the time because she has a fear. It was a long time ago, so I can't remember exactly what the fear was, but it would keep her up at night. Like she couldn't fall asleep because she had to keep swallowing. It was almost like she was afraid that she couldn't swallow. And so she would continue to swallow almost to prove that she could. So that's super interesting.
So my intuition right now is wondering if she was ever choked or had a choking situation on food as a youngster.
Yeah.
because that sensation is typically brought up. So when we go back to that up to 5 years old kind of situation, if you were ever like not able to get something out, that can be that trauma, that little T,
Mm-hmm.
that little T trauma, that could be part of that. But, how many of us remember choking on food as an infant? Like I don't, but my mom has said that I did something before I was age 5. I had my tonsils taken out when I was 4. I do remember that just because of photos that were taken. That's my memory jog. And then talking to my mom about that. So, yeah, if there were any surgeries that took place, if there were ear infections, because that connection can also take place. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you hear this with other people, but I could see myself in like all 5.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, what trauma happened that I'm not aware of?
And I'm the same way. And I'll be honest with you. It's not been since I finished my certification with Anna Judith in 2015 that I actually, in my life, rainbows and unicorns. Like that's how I looked at my childhood. It wasn't up until I was about 17, 18 years old that I had to really step up and find my voice with my father. I'll share this story with you. This is the one biggest aha for me that
Do you want me to not record? Or are you okay? I can't record? Okay.
Yeah, I can get through it without crying now.
It's okay if you cry too.
So my mom and I were outside, and my dad traveled a lot with his job. And he came home from work, and she and I were outside. I'm originally from the Midwest. So one of the biggest things was we had this evergreen tree out front that always had bagworms on it. They hang down. So they look like a 2-inch pine cone, but that's not what they are. They can really harm the tree ultimately. He'd asked us to pick them off before he left. Every year, this is what we had to do. And so we did it. Well, mom and I happened to be outside doing this, and dad came home, and he was angry that we had not done this sooner. Like these things had been hanging on the tree too long. He'd asked us to do them before he left. We didn't. We waited. We didn't know when he was coming home. And so he came home while we're doing this, and he got so mad at me that he said, "Give me your car keys. You're grounded." Now, I was 18 years old at this time, and I had a job, I had school, the whole bit, right? And I said to him, "Okay, so are you going to take me to my job tonight and then pick me up after? And are you going to take me to school tomorrow?" "No, you're going to ride the school bus." "Okay, well, how am I going to get to work?" And all of a sudden, and I was doing really good, keeping a straight face, but I turned and I looked at my mom. She was kind of on the other side of the tree. And I turned and I looked at her and I was like, "What is this?" Like, I am not a child. I'm technically an adult. And you're wanting to take away my car that I've paid for, that I pay the insurance on, that, and I looked at my dad, and that's when I said, I'm like, "Who are you? Like, where is this coming from?" So hearing somebody question his behavior did not go over well. Did not go over well. And especially with laughter on top of it, like laughing at him.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole dynamic took on something completely different between my dad and I at that point. It had started right around when I was 17, but at 18, it was like
18 mark.
Yeah. And that's what I need. So that 18 mark, I can totally relate to that. And my 17 years beforehand to me was rainbows and unicorns. But it was at that 18 year of age mark that it shifted. And it's so interesting to me. And I don't know, maybe I have blinders up big time about the 17 years prior to that. But I choose to remember happier things beforehand.
Very interesting. Because, trauma does affect our behaviors, little T trauma and big T trauma. Our experience affects our behaviors. And so sometimes when we just look at behaviors, when we're trying to determine our Enneagram type, it just doesn't. It's a process. And, I think the process of mistyping is a part of the process that really helps us unbox ourselves. I think the people who figure out their type right away miss out on the gold that studying the Enneagram can do for you. And I bet it's the same way with this too. Like if you don't really understand like each of these deprivations, like the right to exist or the right to have, masochist was the right to
ask.
Right to ask. Oh, that is so good.
With the masochist, the endurer. So if you think about this person, they're constipated a lot. Like that's another one because they're holding in. They have a harder time voicing up because they're pleasing everyone, right? So they'll shut down.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because like just based off of your descriptions, like if people didn't really understand the Enneagram for what it actually is, and they were just looking at these behaviors, like I put schizoid, type 9, a lot of type 9, type 4, maybe even some type 5. Oh, with the long and skinny. Yeah, I can definitely see that with type 5. Not that type 5s are all long and skinny, but the stereotypical one is. And I've even said this, I'm like, your brand of type whatever is not the same as somebody else's brand of type whatever because of the different experiences that we have. The oral, I said that's a lot of type 2-ish, but that can also be type 4, type 6, type 7. I mean, there's just so much.
Well, and even as an individual, like you said, when you look at and you hear the qualities behind each of these 5 character structures, you can go, oh, well, I have that, and I have that, and oh, I have that. So wait, if I have something from all of them, am I just really messed up? No, it's just part of who you are. And the fact that you can even understand and see that you have parts of each one, that's huge.
It is.
Because a lot of people are so disconnected from who they are, what they're doing, and how to move through life, right? So this whole process of just being aware and then knowing that, okay, well, that could have stemmed from this circumstance and this could have stemmed from this circumstance, but it doesn't put me in just one. So when we think about it then from the chakra standpoint, so the vinyasa flow that many people know about, you start standing, you lean over, you either step back to a high lunge or you jump back to a plank position, then you move to plank, you lower down, you go up into cobra or up dog, then you go into down dog, then you step or jump forward, and then you come up to standing. That's just one set. And then you switch and then you go to the other side so you balance out. So when I watch people, and this has taken time in my life, I stopped doing practice while I was teaching because I needed to watch everybody. If I was so in my own body and I wasn't observing my clients in the room, I couldn't help them be more alert to themselves. So like somebody who has incredibly mobile joints, their hypermobility is just through the roof. I had to work on them harder because I understood where they were coming from. I had that. And you can blow out a knee or a shoulder or an elbow so much faster when you have really super flexible joints. So that muscle engagement, that hugging in needed to occur more, and the slight bend to the joints needed to occur more. But for somebody who, when they do a standing forward fold and their knees are bent and their arms are just kind of dangling there and they can't touch the floor, I'm not going to push them to do anything. One of my very first clients, that was her. She could not touch the floor. I thought she was joking with me because she was a jokester when the first time I met her. I thought, oh, she's kidding. I went over and I put my hand on her back to try to help her move down. And it was like spring. She's shot up and then she went back down again. And I was like, oh. And for me to like physically feel that under my hand, pushing her down and then trying to get her to come back. And she just like popped up and was like, what are you doing?
It registers like what they're going through.
Yes. Yes. So for me, being able to walk around the room and be able to kind of be in their energetic field, I got a sense of what they were feeling. But at that time, early on, when I was teaching and doing all of this, that was also when I was starting to pick up back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, little toe pain. I'll never forget the little toe pain because I was like, whose little toe ever hurts unless if you hit it on a piece of furniture, right?
My husband.
Has little toe pain.
Well, he would be like your client that bends over. Like, I'm like, bend over. And he's like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, bend over.
Yeah.
And he's like, I am. But he loves yoga. But I'm not sure he loves doing yoga with me because I do what you do. I observe. And then I don't get anything out of it because I'm too busy observing him and trying to make suggestions of, what might be more comfortable for him. And it's like, okay, so I'm just going to stop doing that. But he cannot,
Tuck his toes.
yeah, like that is so hard for him.
So toes, when you try to tuck your toes, this is the joints in your toes, and there's 2 joints in the toes, and that's your sinuses. So does he have sinus pain?
Not really.
So typically toes deal with sinus pressure and pain. There's some vision stuff that can go along with that too. So reflexology is, if you look into that, that can give you some standpoint about that. I have a whole foot class that I teach.
What?
Foot. It's all about feet. So it's a workshop that I teach that's just, it's so incredible because if there's pain in your feet, how can you walk? It's really hard. If you are diabetic and you have neuropathy, how are you connected to your feet? So those people who have pain in their feet are usually up here in their head and disassociating from their legs, from their body.
Okay. So this is really interesting because he's a type 9, so he's not very aware of his body. And so not all type 9s are unaware of their bodies. He just happens to be that variety. But he is in his head all the time. He's a runner, so he doesn't necessarily have pain, but I think he doesn't register the pain. He has very high pain tolerance. And he's small from the waist up and ginormous from the waist down, like huge quads, huge calves. He tends to use all of the legs instead of his back. So he'll use his legs instead of his core, and very tight hips. Are you feeling a bit disappointed that you haven't finished that project yet? Are the kids' schedules impacting your business? Or are the demands of your business affecting your relationships at home? Maybe you need a magic formula for that work-life balance before your fire gets so dim or it completely burns out. I've been there. There was a point in my life where I was juggling 2 businesses and homeschooling and had personal health issues. There was barely time to even connect with myself, much less connect with my husband. When I was finally officially diagnosed with ADHD, I felt like that explained everything. I had a new perspective and started approaching things in a new way. So I created a guide containing 20 tips that I personally use, and they have worked for me for helping me stay on course with my goals. Now, you might not have ADHD, but I bet you can relate to having a million distractions during the day. So if you're ready to stop procrastinating or stop being hard on yourself for missing yet another deadline, self-imposed or not, go ahead and download the guide at powercoachjen.com. If you just find one tip from the list that helps you move forward today, you will be so glad you took the time to read it. Go to powercoachjen.com and download the guide right now.
Yeah. So that gets into the rigid. And so that achiever, anybody who runs, like I look at them as being achievers because they're plowing through.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. They're plowing through. I ask girlfriends of mine who run, I'm like, do you really enjoy that? And they're like, well, like, no, I don't know. When I was younger, I was great at sprinting, but I hated the long haul. Like that was not me. I was a sprinter. I did awesome at that, but the long haul, forget it. Forget it. Just wasn't going to happen. Okay. So the reason why your husband cannot bend over is because his hamstrings are tight. His quads are tight. For him to sit on the floor and sit back into hero pose where he would bend his knees, his feet would try to rest flat, and he would put his butt on his heels is probably impossible. He's probably more of an L shape where he can't even sit back towards his heels. And that is very, very common. And so, one thing I've always told couples who come to my class, I'd like for you to separate yourselves and be on different sides of the room so you cannot mentally pay attention to what your spouse is doing, because
Like I was doing.
yeah, that right there can hurt a marriage.
Amen.
Especially with somebody
doing yoga.
yeah, and especially with somebody who wants to have the right to feel, and yet they're being not necessarily shamed, but they're being told what to do, corrected. They don't like that. That's the reason why runners typically run alone, is because they can get into the zone on their own time and in their own headspace and just go with it. Yeah. I mean, isn't it amazing how all of these different parts and pieces are just interconnected for a lot of people? Because for me, when I had my meltdown on the mat that early on in my yoga practice, that was from doing hip stretches. Like, we did a lot of hip stretches. We started moving into back bends. And I mean, when you get your body to move in the reverse, where you're opening the front of your body, you're opening your chest, you're opening across your shoulders, because again, my tendency is to drop my shoulders forward. So getting that proper alignment. And when you're feeling balanced and powerful and all those wheels are spinning the correct way, you don't have one that's going in the reverse or it's flat altogether. When you can get all of that moving correctly and comfortably, then you stand taller, you feel brighter.
One of the things that I notice about me when I'm practicing yoga is I tend to lean forward. And I always associated that with my have an auditory processing disorder and I have a sensory processing disorder. And so I just tend to lean forward a lot. Like, there's a lot of times where I'm like, just sit back, Jen, you're fine. You don't have to be right up in the camera like this. But I tend to lean forward. I know that sometimes when I'm eating, if this table's too short, but like, because I'm short, if I'm at a restaurant or something, I'll just lean into the table. You already are profiling me, I can tell. But I'll just lean into the table and just kind of rest my shoulders into things. And then, like, one of the things I'm really cognizant about. So, like, this morning, it was a very simple practice with Warrior One and Warrior Two. Just remembering that I need to be straight up and down and to just lunge straight up and down and not lunge forward and not lunge back. And I'm trying to overcompensate, like trying to be very aware. And I don't have a mirror in my bedroom to kind of see where I am. And I was like, or am I too far back? So, I mean, so what is that?
Okay, so from the perspective of when I see clients who lean forward a lot, it's one of two things. Either mentally, they're already jumping ahead to the future, or they're leaning in to hear what you have to say. So it depends on the situation. For you, it's going to the future. That was my immediate thought.
It can also be the hearing thing because I do have the processing thing.
And that can be part of it. Like, that has been a constant for you in your life, to lean in, to hear, to connect. And then if you lean too far back, you're stuck in the past.
And type 7s don't like that.
So think about somebody who sits on the ground, cross-legged. Their knees are up to their ears. Their back is tight. Their hips are tight.
Okay.
And their mid back shoots behind them. They're collapsing forward with their shoulders and dropping into their chest. So they're kind of lingering in the past.
So fascinating.
Oh, I know.
That's my husband. He's a type 9 and type 9s are past focused. So fascinating. Yeah. And then here I'm sitting in a chair, but I'm sitting cross-legged.
Yeah, like, it's these little things that from a body perspective that I've just observed, and it's so incredible to me. And my intuition kicks in, and I have learned because early on I was like, oh, so tell me about, and I'm like, they didn't give you permission to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing that? And so I had to learn early on, shut up, don't just invade. You
Yeah.
know, you got to ask in order to be able to share. And it's like an intuitive, you have to be able to ask for permission to share what you're sensing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the whole process is just incredible.
That's a perfect coaching skill too, the asking of permission, because if not, just like your therapist, it can create trauma.
Yeah, well, that was my first experience. My second experience, I did go again in my late 30s and it was better, but I just have come to realize I am not one who likes to talk about my stuff. I'd rather just process it on my own and move it out of me. And that's where we are all different. I know I haven't found the best therapist in the world yet, but it's part of the journey. We're all on a different journey, and whatever you need, you need.
Yeah. And you might be like me. I don't do well with therapists because they can't keep up with me. Like they can't keep up with my thought processing because I process so fast. I work better with a coach. And so, because a coach is just there to give me the space to be able to process the things.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. So, one of the intuitive classes I've taken years ago, I've learned that there's three types of people: the individual who is already 10 steps in the future, which is me, and that's you as well. So, we're already thinking about tomorrow or the weekend or next year. Like we're ahead. There are people who, so this is from a processing standpoint of a situation of, you know, whatever. Then there are the people who process right then and there, right in the moment. And then there's people who process after. And my mom processes after. So when I know I need to have a question that I need an answer from her, I ask her usually before I'm into my next thing so that she can sit with it, stew on it, and then answer me later. And that to me was the biggest aha moment of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when I watch my clients that I work with, like you, how you lean into it. And the reason why I was laughing, when you
Leaning
were
down.
talking, yeah, with because you're interested. That's the other thing. Like you're interested, you're being drawn in, you're taking it in. You're not in the past where you're just leaning way back. But this process of connection to, again, it could be a coworker, your spouse, your children, whomever, just kind of observing this. And I watch that with my clients so that I know how to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even like walking, do you find yourself when you walk that your chin is way far forward? Or do you just find yourself like where you hinge at your waist and
I'll
you
have
walk?
to pay attention. I know my husband he's a walker like this, but again, he's a type 9, so he takes on the energy of the room. And so it just depends on where he is.
Yeah. So that connection, like watching how somebody enters a space, yeah, versus like for you, my guess is you're leaning more from your chest and it's kind of a hinge at your waist and you're leading more from your chest, which for you, your heart centered, like you're more drawn to that energy of your heart.
That's very interesting because type 7s are emotional blind. So must be why I'm like, well, maybe I have to think about that. I have no idea because I'm blind to it. But you weren't. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so check in, like when you're in your yoga practice and you're doing a standing forward fold, check in where the weight is into your feet, because most likely for you, it's going to be back in your heels more versus your toes.
I am a toe walker, and I don't know if that affects it. That's part of my sensory processing issues. So when I am in a lunge or even in a forward fold, I have to cognitively think to sit back in my heels. And I've been doing yoga for so long, I'm not sure if this is an overcompensation of how I normally would do it or what. But like if I'm in a lunge, if I'm in a warrior pose, I have to remember to balance the weight into my heels. I tend to want to go into my toes.
Okay. So again, that's more future oriented. That's interesting though, because I would have thought that you would have sunk back into the pose just a little bit more. So there you go.
So interesting.
You're still forward thinking, even in your stance.
And with the Enneagram, I recognize that where I become more secure is when I embrace more of my type 5-ness, which is more past oriented, which is more like reflective and sitting back and observing. So that's what type 5s do, is they sit back and observe and not have to be so engaged. They're engaged up here, but not physically.
Trust yourself.
Yeah. This is so awesome. And I know I still have questions, but don't know what they are yet. Because, I mean, there really is so much to unpack. This is also fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. This is really good. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and reviewing the Unbox Your Personality podcast. To learn more about yourself, go to powercoachjen.com. Find out how you are different so you can make your difference.